Hey guys, my name is and always will be Zero, and welcome to the second Beyond the Game podcast.
Driven by a passion to win, playing heart to heart, face to face. The challenge of a lifetime stands before us now. Beyond the game, in the shadow of the golden gates, we have come to decide our fate. We're here to celebrate. Beyond the game, beyond the game. At last, the moment's at hand. All we need is to believe we can. We'll make our stand. Beyond the game, 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 beyond the game. The world's cyber game.
Okay guys, today's topic is going to be very specific. We're going to talk about learning. I'm going to teach you guys how to learn. Learning is really what separates the good players from the great players. Those who are able to learn from their games are able to notice their mistakes and make sure that they don't repeat those mistakes. I had a very poor regionals experience going 4-4, so I have a lot to learn about this format myself, so I figured I would show you guys the steps that I'm taking to learn about this format so that you can repeat my steps. First and foremost, I should probably say that this podcast isn't going to teach you guys about the format itself. I'm not going to tell you guys this is the deck to play and you won't lose. That really doesn't work. What I'm going to show you guys right now is how to learn from your games, playtest or tournament, and then move forward doing better as a result of that game. As I said before, I went 4-4 at regionals. I went in playing Magnezonian Mega, and I just didn't have a very good time. I played a lot of bad matchups, and then the games I did play that were good, I really didn't do well. Because of this, I have a lot to learn from my regionals experience. Probably the best matchup I could learn from is my fourth matchup. I played against Magnabor, and I ended up going 1-1 prizes. It all came down to me playing a copycat for 6, and I needed to draw a junk arm out of 8 cards. I missed it. I was really sad, and naturally, I went on Facebook to complain about my luck. Not realizing though, that the turn before I had played a junk arm, and wasted it searching for a communication to just not get a Pokemon. Had I not done this, I would have had a higher chance to get the junk arm next turn, and I knew I would need junk arm eventually. But I searched my discard pile and knew I still had one in my deck, so I figured I could waste a few cards. Well, that ended up losing me the game by losing the odds. More often than not, in a very close game, the deciding factor at the end of the game is luck. It's either a top deck or a coin flip or who knows what, but in really close games, luck is the deciding factor more often than not. The luck at the end of the game, we really can't learn much from it. There's just not much that we can do, but often, little things in the middle of the game are really what make the difference at the end. For example, benching that Cleffa might not be a very good idea, even though you get to draw one more card for a magnetic draw. It might be a very important draw, but because they're playing catchers, they could take an easy price off a Cleffa and end up winning the game as a result of it. People often overlook these little steps in the middle of the game that end up making a huge difference later on. Typically, games are won or lost at the middle or even beginning of the game, rather than at the end of the game. The story that I like to tell with this is that at Battle Roads, I got to play against Lilligant Vileplume. It's a pretty cool deck, whatever. The first thing he does is he fills his bench out, but he only has one Oddish. As a result, I was able to snipe all of his Oddish away with Yanmega. At the end of the game, he showed me he had Rare Candy Vileplume in his hand at all times, but because I got rid of Oddish every turn, he just didn't have a way to do it. He lost the game because he filled his bench out. Had he put 2 Oddish down, he would have won the game. My deck couldn't compete with Vileplume. But even so, because he filled his bench first turn, it was the first thing he did, he lost the game. Next Battle Roads, he told me that he wouldn't forget to put 2 Oddish on bench first turn. He was not going to lose another game like that, and he didn't, not from what I saw. He successfully learned from his mistake, and instead of complaining about it and moping, he figured out his mistake and resolved to never do that again. Going off of that, lesson 1, and probably the most important lesson about learning from your games, make sure you remember the entire game. Oh my god, this is the most important thing you can do. The end of the game isn't the reason you lost. The middle of the game is often the most important part, as I said before. So really focus on that. That's where all the hard decisions come from. Should I catcher up his Magnezone or catcher up his Emboar? What should I do? Remember that part, and remember what you did in that situation, and change it if it didn't work. Often the late game can be a factor, but the middle game is really what's important. The second thing you need to know about learning from your games is learning how to learn from playtesting. Your playtesting games are probably the biggest step in figuring out what you're going to play and how good you're going to do. So it's very important that you don't just play these games and move on with your life. You have to learn about how your deck's going to play and maybe what you need to change from your deck. I'm a big believer in feelings. When I play my playtest rounds, I feel whether or not my trainer line is good. Typically I'll play 10 games against a deck that doesn't want to trainer lock you, against a medium to kind of slow deck, whatever, usually Magnezone or Tyram, just because those are good decks that are slow-ish but not too slow. So what I'll typically do is I'll play those games, and each game I'll kind of write down how the deck feels. So for example, if one game I felt like I didn't have enough draw, then I'll write that down. And after the 10 games, I'll kind of get an idea. If I wrote down 3 or 4 times that my draw is bad, then it's probably a big issue and you need to change it. After those first 10 games, and I kind of figure out where my trainer line is going and what I want to change as far as the trainer line goes, I'll play 10 more games against each individual deck. So for example, I'll play 10 games against Gothitelle, I'll play 10 games against Stage 1, etc. And in those games, I'll write down how I feel and my win-loss record. So for example, in Gothitelle, I feel really bad because my trainers don't get work and all I'm drawing is trainers. Well, maybe that's something I need to fix. Maybe I want to cut down on my trainer line and start adding up some supporters. It'll slow my matchup against everything else, but you know what, against Gothitelle it's really going to help. Changing your deck mid-testing is very dangerous. If I play against Gothitelle and I figure out that I really want supporters, changing that deck before I play against my next matchup, let's say Stage 1, is very dangerous. I want to get a good idea of everything, all my matchups against everything. It's very important to know what your deck is going to do. And you know what? Sometimes it's okay to just take the loss. I'll learn that I don't want to play against Gothitelle. There's nothing wrong with that. But as long as you know kind of where your deck is going, supporter and trainer wise, that's very important. And once again, if I feel that I'm getting gypped by playing a pawn instead of a copycat or a copycat instead of the 4th judge, you know, I'll immediately write that down and make sure if I feel it a few more times, I'll change it. There's no surefire way in being able to feel what's right and wrong, and sometimes decisions you make will end up being wrong in the tournament, but you have to accept that and move on. You just, as long as you know what you're doing with the deck and how you're feeling during the games, you should be able to figure out a clear path to making the perfect deck for you. Another very important lesson that I've learned over this past week in regionals is to be very careful when planning your deck. Always make sure you have everything you need, whether it be cards or deck boxes or sleeves. The way I learned this primarily was after the event, I decided, hey, why not? May as well join the VGC, the Video Game Championships. I did pretty well. I went 5-1. My loss was due to a critical hit, so I'm fairly happy with my results. 6th round though, they checked my game to make sure I didn't hack, and I'm feeling confident I didn't hack, you know. No big deal, I should pass the test. Well, as it turns out, I nicknamed 2 of my Pokemon the same thing, and I eventually got DQ'd as a result of it. Had I been more careful to not nickname them the same thing, I would have probably done well in the tournament, maybe top 4 hopefully. I would have gotten some money to go to nationals, and I would have gotten some buys and some championship points. You know, I joined for fun, and I kind of made my team last minute. So it's really a shame that I got DQ'd, but because I wasn't very careful, that type of thing can happen. So once again, always be very careful when planning and preparing. Stupid things like this can happen, and they do sometimes. It's a shame when they do, but it's definitely my fault for nicknaming them the same thing, and I know for next time not to do that. Going off of this, I'd highly recommend anyone who's going to an event double checks last minute before they leave to make sure they have everything. For example, you need your deck list, you need your deck, that's important, you need your trades, and just do a last minute check. Go over the rules, just make sure that you have a legal deck and or team in my case. And it doesn't take a lot of time, but it could save you a world of hurt. For example, I was very frustrated that I got DQ'd. Had I done a last minute check like this, I probably wouldn't have gotten DQ'd. I could have fixed the problem before it happened. I just don't agree with their call on DQing me. I feel like I deserve something more like a warning and them telling me not to use the Pokemon. But, you know, whatever happened, happened. And there's not much I can do in hindsight. Just know for next time and make sure it doesn't happen again. Now then, the best thing you can do to learn how to improve your game is to ask a friend to help you. Find a friend who wants to play test a bunch of different decks with and against you, and make them write down everything they see you do wrong. Often it's hard for you to see what you do wrong because you forget about it, and then later in the game something goes wrong as a result of your mistake. If your opponent's able to immediately spot mistakes that you make, because it's easier when you're on the other side of the table to find mistakes, and they write it down for you, that's a fantastic way for you to improve your game. Moreover, find someone who's willing to help you with your deck lists. It can be somebody who has preferences, like for example, I typically play lock decks, so I like Vileplume, I like Gothitelle, I loved Gardevoir Galley years ago. So if any of my friends ever have a question about those types of decks, they'll immediately go to me, because they know I'm the person who knows the most about those decks out of anyone else that my friends know. Just find friends like that who are willing to help you and point things out. I'd highly recommend you guys be that friend for somebody else as well. If you're able to find mistakes in your opponents, you're going to be better at finding mistakes in general, and you'll eventually be able to see what you've done right and what you've done wrong during your own games while you're playing. I think the biggest thing that you can get out of this discussion is to write things down. Just know how you're playing and make sure you're able to remember what you're doing at different times. If you're able to write down how you feel while you're playing a deck, you'll be able to remember for later on. If you write down important moves that you make during the game, you'll be able to remember how they go and how they end up working out. If attacking the Magnezone instead of the Emboar leads you to winning the game more often than attacking the Emboar first leads you to winning the game, that's huge knowledge that you just have, so that you'll be able to do that exact move during your tournament games. Situations won't present themselves in the same way more than once, but being able to have a general idea of where you're going in a game is fantastic for when you're playing the actual game. The biggest fault that I see in players is that they don't know how to playtest properly. Using the skills that we discussed in this podcast, you'll be able to be a much better playtester, both for you and for your opponent. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. I hope the topics that we discussed in this episode really help you for your playtesting and eventual tournament games. Before I go though, I have something exciting to tell you guys. As you probably noticed because you're watching the video, we're on YouTube! Yay! To celebrate this, I thought I would do a little bit of a contest. To win, all you guys need to do is subscribe to our channel, give a like to this video, and in the comments tell me about a game, whether tournament or playtesting, that you learned a lot about. Just give me a brief background from the game and maybe kind of a brief sentence about what you learned. I'll choose the top 2 paragraphs before the next podcast, and I'll do something really special for you guys. Okay, I'm not going to say what it is because that ruins the surprise, but it's going to be special and everybody's going to know about it. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. Please rate, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to write that paragraph in the comments.